Okay, next question. And I realise my hair seems to get crazier with each one of these. Whatever, you didn't join us to listen to my hair. Listen about my hair? Well, maybe you did. But, next question. How do I think technology is going to change politics? Well, that's a huge question. But specifically, how might it change voting systems? So, could we vote online? Could there be a app on our phones where we approved legislation or something like this? Yes, in theory, and there's been all sorts of fascinating proposals put forward. Actually, my answer to this question is I think the more interesting question is the negative. We've been talking about this for a long time now. When I first started my politics degree 12, 13 years ago, we were talking about internet democracy and so on. We've had the technology. The question is, why haven't voting systems changed? I mean, at all, right? And there's a lot of these interesting negative questions in politics. So, to take the authoritarian side, it seemed common sense some time ago that a lot of new technologies to do with genetic engineering, to do with drug use, medication, mind control, that all of these things would start to be employed by authoritarian regimes in order to control their populace. So in Brave New World, that's very much a prediction of that, right? And Brave New World was self-consciously set against 1984, which is a sort of much more traditional totalitarian state. Except it didn't happen. Although authoritarian regimes completely lack morals, and they seemingly are willing to do whatever it takes to stay in power, that was a road that, as far as I know, none of them ever went down. And it's an interesting question as to why not. So, on the democratic side, we have all this new technology. People have been talking about using it to improve democracy for a long time now. And we simply haven't. We're voting the same way we did 100 years ago. So, why not? I have two theories for this. The first is that the people who decide on changing the rules are the same people who are the ultimate beneficiary of those rules. So, it is always going to be a bit of a stretch for people who are in power because of a specific set of rules to change those rules, even when they might be ideologically sold on doing so. So I'll give one example from my own career in politics. Is about 5 years back I was involved in an effort to change New York's campaign finance law. As you probably know, American politics has a huge amount of money in it, and that's very corrupting and distorting of the democratic process. And we were advocating for something called public financing, which essentially is a way of getting funds to candidates who don't have big money backers, and kind of just evening the playing field a little bit with respect to candidates who do. Now, all of the key players involved in this, it's a blue state, the governor, the key players in the state senate, certainly in the state assembly, all said they were for this. And they gave quite compelling reasons, and they gave reasons in terms of their own experience of politics. A lot of them said, listen, I don't like the fact that half my job is making fundraising calls. I don't want to be doing that. Yeah, let's get public financing. And it was there, and they all said it was going to be there, and it was in the state budget, until it wasn't, 48 hours beforehand. And no one really had it. We just couldn't do it this time. Just not the year for it. And the next year wasn't the year for it either. So why not? Well, again, if you're in the system, you're benefiting from the system. So if you are the governor, and you call up an important businessman and go, Mr. Important Businessman, I need you to write me $10,000 for my campaign, and the businessman goes, oh, righto, he's a British businessman for some reason, righto, certainly I'll do that, because that's the governor, right? Yes, it's the governor, absolutely, I'm an important person, I want to keep that relationship open, I want to be able to get the governor on the phone when I need him, yeah, $10,000. You're running for governor, you're Cynthia Nixon, you call up the same person. Well, you know, I love what you're doing, Cynthia, sounds jolly good. Don't know why this guy's so British. But not this time. Why not? Because she's not governor. She's not likely to be governor. Why would I buy influence except from people who have influence. So, as much as politicians might agree ideologically that there's too much money in politics, and as much as even they might not like it personally, they might not like, and many of them don't like having to make those fundraising calls, at the end of the day, they get their fundraising calls answered. Do they really want to pass a law that's going to mean that they're going to get more primary challenges, and their primary challenges are going to be better funded, and it comes out of the state budget? So I think that's kind of the story of what happened there. So the moral of the story is, it's difficult, it's not impossible, like politicians can be genuinely ideological, but it's difficult to get someone to change a system whose their job, their paycheck, depends on that system, right? That's answer one. Answer two is occasionally it will be in politicians' interests to change the system. So we had a vote on we had a referendum on changing the voting laws in Britain a while back to an alternate vote system. Now this was in powerful people's interests. It was definitely in the Liberal Democrats' interest, and that was the price they asked for joining a coalition with the Tories. It wasn't necessarily in the Tories' electoral interests, but in order to form a government, they needed the Liberal Democrats, and that's the price they paid for their support. So that was the deal. So you did get a point there when it was, for complicated reasons, in the elite's interest to change those laws. And the public said no. And the public said no quite overwhelmingly, which brings me to my second point, is if you ask people, everyone is a liberal in theory and a conservative in practice. Everyone loves the idea of change as a concept. When you put a specific change in front of people, they dry up. So, if you go to people and you say, should we have new and innovative ways to vote using smartphones and stuff, people are like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then you're like, okay, well, here's a proposal. Oh, I don't know about that. So, I think there's an inherent conservatism on both the part of the powerful and the population. And I think if even very modest reforms can't get through, I'm profoundly sceptical that voting on your smartphone will ever happen. I think it's a fun idea, I think it's a fun thought experiment, but I don't think it's going to happen.